Nestled on the farthest rim of human expansion, Outpost Aeon was less a colony and more a last bastion against the unknown. Beyond it lay the vast expanse of uncharted territory, where human maps were little more than blank slates and the whispers of alien empires carried on solar winds. Aeon stood alone, a testament to human audacity and stubbornness. A fragile dot on a planet with twin moons, endless tundras, and skies perpetually swathed in streaks of blue auroras. Captain Elias Kane stood at the observation deck, staring into the shimmering void. The reinforced glass stretched from floor to ceiling, giving a perfect view of the alien sky. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always clad in his dark, patched-up fleet uniform, Kane bore the weight of his crew and the countless silent expectations from Earth. His stubbled jaw and the streaks of gray in his dark hair told stories of battles fought long before Aeon became his responsibility. He sipped bitter synthetic coffee, reviewing the recent communiques from Central Command. The messages were brief, cryptic even. The Council back on Earth grew increasingly wary of escalating tensions in this sector. There were rumors of Varn Dominion fleets massing on the edge of known space. The Varn were enigmatic, brutal, and notoriously territorial. Yet they hadn't dared cross the ceasefire line since the last skirmish 3 years prior. Kane's focus shifted as Commander Mira Voss entered, her footfalls light but precise. Voss was as sharp as the edge of a blade, an expert in xenopolitics and military strategy. Her short-cropped silver-blonde hair and piercing green eyes made her a commanding presence, even beside Kane. She handed him a datapad without a word. "We've got something," she said, voice clipped. Kane raised an eyebrow. "Another false alarm from the perimeter sensors?" "No. A distress signal." Mira paused. "Automated. Old Union encryption. At least 2 centuries out of date." That set Kane's nerves alight. "Could be debris from one of the early expeditions." "Maybe. But the signal is coming from within Varn space. Barely across the line, but still inside." Mira crossed her arms. "And there's more, it's coded to Project Helix." Kane nearly dropped his coffee. Project Helix was black file territory. Ultra-classified. Even he wasn't fully briefed on it, and he was the captain of the most isolated outpost in human history. All he knew was that it was a relic from the height of the first human-Varn conflicts, when Earth had been desperate to develop technologies that could match the Varn's biomechanical war machines. He exhaled slowly. "Get Dr. Pierce and Rourke. We need the science team." Moments later, the cramped briefing room buzzed with quiet tension. Dr. Nathaniel Pierce, Aeon's chief scientist, hunched over the datapad with furrowed brows. Younger than Kane but weathered by fieldwork, Pierce wore rumpled lab gear and always carried a nervous energy. His specialty lay in ancient technologies and xenoarchaeology. "You're sure about this signal?" Kane asked. Pierce nodded. "It's real. The encryption matches some of the old Helix sub-protocols. And it's broadcasting on a low-bandwidth frequency the Varn rarely monitor." Engineer Luke O'Rourke leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his rugged features half-shrouded by the brim of a worn-out cap. Rourke was the backbone of Aeon's engineering team, a brilliant mechanic with a notorious disregard for regulations. "Anything tied to Helix is way above our pay grade, Captain," Kane grimaced. "I know," Mira added. "The signal isn't just a relic. It's active. Someone, or something, turned it on recently." Silence settled. The implications were too great to ignore. "We go dark and investigate," Kane decided, voice hard. "Prep the stealth shuttle. Minimal crew." Hours later, the sleek shuttle, Ghost One, detached from Aeon under cover of a magnetic storm, slipping silently past the outpost's defensive grid. Inside the dim-lit craft, Kane sat alongside Mira, Pierce, and Rourke. Their breaths fogged in the cold air as the vessel drifted closer to the edge of the no-man's land separating humanity from the Varn Dominion. "Entering Varn space," Mira murmured. Pierce's hands trembled slightly as he monitored the signal's beacon. The coordinates led them to a derelict moon orbiting a dying gas giant. The surface of the moon was pockmarked with scars, craters from ancient bombardments, as if it had once been a battleground. "There," Pierce pointed. Nestled in the shadow of a crater's rim lay a structure half buried in ice and rock. The outpost was unmistakably human in design, but ancient. Its steel hull bore the faded insignia of the old Union Navy, something that hadn't been seen in over 2 centuries. "What the hell is a Union outpost doing here?" Rourke whispered. "Let's find out," Kane said. They suited up in light exosuits and disembarked. The biting wind howled as their boots crunched against the frozen terrain. As they approached, the automated distress signal pulsed louder through their comms, guiding them to a breach in the outpost side. Inside, flickering emergency lights cast long shadows over twisted metal and broken consoles. The place reeked of decay, long abandoned yet eerily preserved by the cold. Pierce scanned a nearby terminal. "Power's unstable," he muttered, wiping frost from the interface. "But there's something else, biosigns." Myra's head snapped toward him. "Human?" Pierce hesitated. "It's hard to tell. It's faint and strange." Before Kane could respond, the ground rumbled beneath them. From the far end of the corridor, a door groaned open. Emerging from the shadows was a tall figure clad in battered Union-era power armor, but its design was unfamiliar, sleeker, almost biomechanical in appearance. The figure's visor glowed faintly, casting a blue hue across the frost-covered hall. "Hold position!" Kane barked, weapon raised. The armored figure raised its hands slowly, mechanical servos hissing softly. Then, with a distorted voice, it spoke. "Project Helix. Authorized personnel?" Mira glanced at Kane, stunned. Kane took a step forward. "Captain Elias Kane, Outpost Aeon." "Who are you?" The figure's helmet retracted, revealing a gaunt, pale face with cybernetic implants woven into the skin. The eyes, one human, one a glowing artificial optic, stared back at them. "My designation is Commander Elara Holt," she rasped. "You shouldn't have come here." Before anyone could question further, alarms blared within the base. Pierce's scanner spiked. "Multiple signatures incoming," he whispered. "Not human." Outside, the darkened sky rippled as sleek, insected Varn warcraft descended from the clouds, their ominous forms blotting out the twin moons. The Varn had found them. Kane clenched his jaw. "We're not leaving without answers." Holt nodded grimly. "Then follow me." As they plunged deeper into the ruins of the forgotten base, Kane knew one thing for certain. The cold isolation of Aeon was nothing compared to the storm that was about to engulf them all. Outpost Aeon hung like a defiant ember on the edge of the Krell Nebula, a remote bastion of human ingenuity against the star-swept canvas of uncharted space. Its dark hull bristled with defensive arrays and sensor dishes, perpetually scanning the volatile currents of the nebula beyond. Here, at the fringe of civilization, where the nearest Union system was weeks away, vigilance wasn't just policy, it was survival. Captain Elias Kane stood alone in the observation deck, hands clasped behind his back, eyes reflecting the slow swirl of gaseous storms twisting within the nebula. Aeon was supposed to be a listening post, a silent sentinel keeping an eye on both cosmic anomalies and the slow encroach of the Varn Dominion, whose fleets patrolled the nebulous borders with growing confidence. Kane's jaw clenched as he sipped cold coffee from a battered metal mug. The nebula was beautiful, sure, but Kane had learned long ago that beauty in space often masked danger. It was then the klaxon wailed through Aeon's decks. Kane spun on his heel and strode to the bridge, his long, dark coat sweeping behind him. As he entered, the room was already alive with activity. Crew members snapped to attention at their consoles, illuminated by the glow of interface screens. "Status," Kane barked. Commander Mira Voss, his second in command, was already hunched over a terminal. Her sharp features were lit by scrolling data. "We're receiving a signal, sir. Weak, intermittent, originating from deep inside the Krell Nebula." "Distress signal?" Kane asked. Mira nodded grimly. "Encrypted, but old Union frequency, pre-expansion era." Kane's brow furrowed. "Pre-expansion? That tech's been obsolete for decades." "Exactly," Mira said. "But the signal's repeating. Same structure as our old SOS codes." Kane rubbed his temple. A ghost signal. Ancient tech pinging for help from within the most unstable region of the quadrant. His instincts screamed trap, but his duty screamed louder. They needed answers. Get me Dr. Pierce and Rourke, Kane ordered. Minutes later, Dr. Nathaniel Pierce, Aeon's chief scientist, strode onto the bridge. His disheveled white lab coat and weary eyes betrayed another night lost to research in the station's lower decks. What's so urgent? Pierce asked, scratching at the graying stubble on his chin. Mira filled him in as Kane gestured to the holodeble in the center of the room. A flickering projection of the Krell Nebula bloomed to life, a chaotic, churning storm of red and purple gases. Deep within its heart, a blinking dot marked the distress signal's origin. Pierce adjusted his glasses. That's impossibly deep. Radiation levels inside the nebula spike exponentially past this threshold, he said, tracing an outer ring on the projection. Nothing human should still be broadcasting from there. And yet something is, Kane replied. The turbolift doors opened again to reveal Luca Rourke, chief engineer, wiping grease from his hands. You rang? Kane briefed him, and Rourke whistled low. Anything alive out there would have been fried 100 times over. Unless it's not alive, Pierce suggested. A derelict automated system, maybe? Or worse, bait. Kane's eyes darkened. The Varn were known for their patience and guile. A fake distress call, luring Aeon deeper into the nebula, would be a perfect way to neutralize a key Union outpost. Still, ignoring a distress call, no matter how suspicious, would breach every protocol and moral code Kane upheld. Prep the expedition shuttle, Kane said finally. We're going in. Myra's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Aye, sir. Within hours, Kane, Mira, Pierce, Rourke, and a small squad of Marines boarded the expedition shuttle, the Spectre. Its reinforced hull was fitted with radiation dampeners and ion shields, standard for deep space salvage operations, though Kane doubted even Spectre was designed for the hellscape inside the nebula. As they departed Aeon and drifted toward the storm's edge, Kane stared at the swirling miasma. Cut the chatter, he ordered over comms. Stay sharp. Spectre plunged into the Krell Nebula, and the world outside transformed. Red lightning licked across the hull, and gaseous tendrils coiled around them like writhing serpents. Instruments fluctuated wildly, and for a heartbeat, the NAV systems blinked out entirely. Losing sensors, Mira reported. Switching to manual tracking. Rourke cursed softly. We're flying blind. Dr. Pierce was glued to his readouts. Radiation is off the charts. Whatever's broadcasting this signal, it should be dead, but it's not. As the hours passed, the signal grew stronger but stranger. It shifted tone, weaving in faint harmonics that sounded almost like whispers. Kane felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. That's no standard distress beacon, Pierce said. There's something layered beneath the carrier wave. Mira turned to him. What do you mean? I mean it's talking to us, Pierce murmured, eyes wide. Before Kane could demand clarification, the nebula thinned slightly ahead, revealing a haunting sight, a derelict Union warship, half consumed by crystalline growths, floating like a dead god amidst the storms. Spectre shuddered as they approached. Kane's voice was steel. What the hell is that? Pierce scanned it. It's an Odyssey-class battleship. Missing for over 60 years. Mira leaned forward. The USS Resolute. Rourke's voice was hushed. But it was declared lost during the Krell incursion, long before we built Aeon. The crew stared at the fractured hulk. Its hull was scarred with impact craters, strange alien vines snaking across its length, pulsing with faint energy. The nebula itself seemed to recoil around it, parting as if fearing its presence. Pierce gulped. Sir, this ship should have been dust by now. Kane stared, eyes narrowing. Prepare to board. As the Spectre locked onto the Resolute's docking bay, the team suited up. Magnetic boots clamped onto the metal floors as they stepped into the belly of the derelict. Inside, darkness swallowed them. Emergency lights flickered sporadically, casting broken shadows across bulkheads warped by heat and pressure. The air smelled of ozone and decay. Mira swept her rifle across the empty corridors. No bodies? No signs of life, Pierce confirmed. Or death? Nothing. Rourke knelt by a torn panel, examining the alien crystalline growth oozing from the walls. This isn't natural. It's feeding on the ship. The deeper they went, the stronger the signal became, no longer faint, but now rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. Eventually, they reached the command deck. The captain's chair sat empty, and the consoles sparked with erratic static. Yet at the center, the mainframe remained active, covered in the same crystalline material. Pierce approached cautiously, running his scanner across it. Sir, this ship isn't just broadcasting. It's alive. Kane's heart sank as the realization dawned. The crystalline infection wasn't just parasitic, it was intelligent. Worse, it was ancient. Get what data you can, Kane ordered. We're pulling out. But it was too late. The lights surged, and the walls trembled. The crystalline growths pulsed brighter, and suddenly the whispering harmonics pierced their calms. Mira staggered. They're in our heads. Pierce's face paled. It's communicating. And it's not human. The ship shuddered violently. Red tendrils snapped out from the walls, snaring two Marines and dragging them screaming into the dark. Fall back! Kane roared, firing his weapon at the tendrils. The plasma bolts scorched the crystalline limbs, but they regrew almost instantly. Spectre's voice crackled through their comms. Captain, the Resolute is powering up! Main weapons online! Kane's blood ran cold. The derelict wasn't a tomb, it was a trap. As the crew sprinted back through the corridors, the Resolute's bulkheads warped and twisted as if alive, sealing exits and forcing them deeper into its corrupted heart. Pierce shouted, It's assimilating the ship, turning it into a weapon! Kane's voice was a growl. Then we'll tear it apart before it tears us apart. But as they reached the engineering deck, what they found was worse. A massive crystalline core, thrumming with alien energy, was growing from the heart of the ship. Symbols older than the Krell Nebula itself flickered across its surface. This wasn't just a Varn trap, this was something predating both human and Varn civilizations. Sir? Mira whispered. This is ancient tech. Kane gritted his teeth. And we just woke it up. The air aboard Outpost Aeon grew thicker with unease after the first contact with Admiral Kaler. Captain Elias Kane stood motionless on the observation deck, gazing into the void where the Varn Dominion fleet had retreated behind the storm wall of the Krell Nebula. His mind replayed the cryptic warning Kaler had left behind. Do not awaken the forgotten! Commander Miravas approached silently, her boots echoing softly. Sir, the crew is waiting for your orders. Kane turned, his jaw tight. We're moving ahead, Commander. We didn't come all this way to back down. As Mira nodded and left to ready the crew, Kane knew the decision would reverberate across the stars. The fragile truce with the Varn Dominion was now in question. Yet something deeper gnawed at him, Kaler's fear, hidden beneath his sharp diplomacy. Hours later, the senior staff convened in the operations room, lit only by the shifting glow of the nebula beyond the viewport. Dr. Nathaniel Pierce, poring over ancient Varn glyphs gathered from past encounters, rubbed his temples. The phrase "the forgotten" appears in several pre-Dominion records. Always in context with warnings. A lost faction, perhaps? Or a sealed anomaly? Engineer Luke O'Rourke added. Or a weapon. The Varn have always cloaked their history in riddles. Could this nebula be the tomb of some ancient superweapon? Myra's voice was steady but concerned. Then why hasn't Kaler simply destroyed us to keep us from finding it? He could have wiped us out. Nathaniel leaned forward. Because he fears what we might uncover, but also might need us. The room fell silent. Kane finally spoke. We're caught in something larger. The Varn wouldn't pull back unless there were forces even they couldn't control. With cautious resolve, Kane ordered the Aeon to breach deeper into the Krell Nebula. As plasma storms licked at the ship's shields and gravimetric distortions twisted the viewports, Mira coordinated with Luca to stabilize the hull. The crew worked tirelessly, navigating pockets of turbulence and space-time fractures that warped their sensors. Then, amidst the chaos, a signal broke through, ancient, fragmented, and human in origin. Nathaniel paled as he traced its source to a derelict station hidden deep within the storm, masked from scans. "A human outpost," Nathaniel whispered, voice trembling. "But this predates Outpost Aeon by centuries." Kane's heart sank. "Prepare a team. We're going aboard." The shuttle ride through the dense nebula fog was tense. Mira led the expedition team, including Nathaniel, Luca, and a squad of Marines. As they docked with the drifting station, they were greeted by a chilling sight: skeletal remains in ancient human uniforms, scattered along blood-stained corridors. Luca's voice echoed through his helmet. "No life support, no power. But there's something wrong." Indeed, as they delved deeper, strange growths of obsidian-like material pulsed faintly along the walls. Nathaniel scanned them, eyes widening. "Organic but synthetic. Not Varn. Not human either." They reached the station's central archive chamber. Mira pried open a sealed hatch, revealing a flickering terminal, still operational through some unknown energy source. Nathaniel interfaced with the terminal, and a flood of data poured onto his wrist pad: logs, distress calls, and chilling video feeds of the station's fall. They watched in horror as recordings showed a human crew activating an unknown relic buried in the nebula, unleashing a shadowy force that possessed and consumed them. "This is beyond ancient," Nathaniel murmured. "The Forgotten aren't Varn or human. There's something older. And they're alive." Suddenly, alarms blared as the station's lights flickered red. Mira drew her rifle as eerie whispers filled their comms. "Team, we're not alone." Figures emerged from the darkness, twisted remnants of the station's crew, their bodies fused with the black organic material, eyes glowing faintly. Mira ordered a retreat, but the creatures surged forward with inhuman speed. The Marines opened fire, rounds ricocheting off the creatures' armored hides. Luca hastily triggered a controlled detonation to buy time, collapsing a bulkhead behind them. Breathing heavily aboard the shuttle, Mira stared back at the derelict station as it faded into the nebula's maw. "We just found humanity's first outpost in the Krell Nebula, and its curse." Back aboard Aeon, Kane absorbed the team's report grimly. Nathaniel showed him a final data fragment, an ancient map marking dozens of hidden sites across the nebula. "This wasn't just a research station," Nathaniel explained. "It was a vault, part of a network." Mira crossed her arms. "A network sealing whatever the Forgotten are." Kane stood silent, fists clenched. Kayla's warning now carried a heavy weight. The Varn had known about this. Perhaps the Dominion had sealed these relics long ago, but never destroyed them. As Aeon drifted deeper into the nebula, Captain Kane knew the fragile balance of power in the galaxy was shifting. The Forgotten were stirring, and humanity was at the center of it all. The Krell Nebula's swirling mists cast an eerie glow upon Outpost Aeon's observation deck. Captain Elias Kane stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the churning expanse beyond the viewport. The recent encounter with the derelict station had left an indelible mark on his psyche. The haunting images of the twisted crew and the cryptic warnings about the Forgotten gnawed at him. Commander Miravas approached, her footsteps barely audible against the hum of the ship. "Captain, we've completed our analysis of the data recovered from the station." Kane turned to face her, his expression grave. "And?" Mira handed him a data pad. "Dr. Pierce believes the station was part of a network designed to contain an ancient threat. The Varn Dominion's presence here might be linked to this." Kane's brow furrowed. "The Varn have always been secretive about their history. If they're involved, it complicates things." Mira nodded. "There's more. We've detected faint energy signatures deeper within the nebula. They match the patterns from the derelict station." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Set a course. We need to uncover the truth before it's too late." Chapter 2: The Abyss Beckons. Navigating the Krell Nebula was akin to traversing a labyrinthine nightmare. Plasma storms erupted without warning, and gravitational anomalies threatened to tear the ship asunder. Engineer Luca Rourke worked tirelessly with his team to maintain the integrity of the Aeon. Shields holding at 75%, Captain, Luca reported, sweat glistening on his brow. But this nebula is unlike anything we've encountered. It's almost as if it's alive. Kane acknowledged the report with a curt nod. Do whatever it takes, Luca. We can't afford to turn back now. Dr. Nathaniel Pierce, seated at a console, analyzed the incoming data. Captain, the energy signatures are increasing in intensity. We're getting closer. Myra's fingers danced over her controls. I'm picking up structures ahead. They appear to be of Varn origin, but different. Kane's jaw tightened. Prepare a boarding team. We need answers. Chapter 3: Shadows of the Past. The boarding team, led by Mira, consisted of Dr. Pierce, Luca, and a squad of Marines. As they approached the structure, its massive spires loomed ominously, shrouded in the nebula's haze. Atmospheric readings are stable, Luca announced. But I'm detecting unusual energy fluctuations. Myra's grip tightened on her weapon. Stay alert. We don't know what's waiting for us. The team advanced cautiously through the structure's corridors, which were adorned with intricate carvings depicting Varn history. Dr. Pierce paused to examine them. These carvings tell a story, he murmured. A tale of a great war against an ancient enemy. The Varn called them the Forgotten. Myra's eyes narrowed. Why would they build a monument to their enemies? Before Dr. Pierce could respond, a low hum resonated through the corridor. The walls vibrated, and the carvings seemed to come alive, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. Everyone, fall back! Mira ordered. But it was too late. The floor beneath them gave way, and they plunged into darkness. Chapter 4: The Heart of the Nebula. Kane paced the bridge, anxiety gnawing at him. The boarding team's signals had vanished, leaving only static in their wake. Any word from the team? He demanded. Negative, Captain, the communications officer replied. We've lost all contact. Kane's fists clenched. Prepare a rescue mission. We can't leave them behind. As the crew scrambled to assemble the rescue team, the ship's sensors blared to life. Captain, we're detecting multiple vessels emerging from the nebula, the tactical officer reported. Kane's eyes widened. Varn ships? No, sir. These signatures don't match any known configurations. The view screen flickered, revealing a fleet of dark, ominous ships materializing from the nebula's depths. Their designs were alien, exuding an aura of malevolence. Open a channel, Kane ordered. A chilling silence followed before a distorted voice crackled through the speakers. You have trespassed where you do not belong. The Forgotten shall rise again. Kane's blood ran cold. All hands, battle stations. Chapter 5: The Forgotten Awaken. Mira awoke to the sound of distant chanting. Her head throbbed, and her vision blurred as she struggled to her feet. The team lay scattered around her, unconscious but alive. Dr. Pierce, Luca, wake up, she urged, shaking them gently. They stirred, groaning in pain. What happened? Luca muttered. We fell into some kind of chamber, Mira replied, scanning their surroundings. The chamber was vast, illuminated by a pulsating blue light emanating from a central altar. Around it, hooded figures chanted in an unknown language. Dr. Pierce's eyes widened in recognition. This is a summoning ritual. They're trying to awaken something. Myra's heart raced. We need to stop them. But before they could act, the chanting reached a crescendo, and the altar erupted in light. A towering figure materialized, its form shifting and amorphous, eyes burning with ancient fury. The Forgotten have returned, it intoned, its voice echoing through the chamber. Chapter 6: The Battle for Survival. Aboard the Aeon, chaos reigned as the alien fleet opened fire. The ship's shields buckled under the assault, and explosions rocked the hull. Return fire! Kane shouted, gripping his chair. The Aeon's weapons blazed to life, but the alien ships were relentless, their technology surpassing anything the crew had encountered. Captain, we can't withstand this much longer, the tactical officer warned. Kane's mind raced. They needed an advantage, something to turn the tide. "Prepare to deploy the experimental weapon," he ordered. The crew hesitated, knowing the risks, but complied. The weapon, a prototype designed to disrupt energy fields, could be their only hope. "Weapon ready, Captain," the weapons officer reported. "Fire!" A beam of crackling energy lanced from the Aeon, striking the lead alien ship. For a moment it seemed to falter, its shields flickering. But then, the alien ship absorbed the energy, redirecting it back toward the Aeon. "Brace for impact!" Kane yelled. The ship shuddered violently as the energy slammed into it, systems failing one by one. Chapter 7: Unity in Desperation. In the chamber, Mira and her team faced the awakened entity. Its presence was overwhelming, a palpable force pressing down on them. Dr. Pierce stepped forward, hands raised. "We mean you no harm. Please let us help you." The entity's gaze fixed on him, and for a moment, it seemed to consider his words. "You are not Varn," it rumbled. "Why have you come?" "We seek knowledge," Dr. Pierce replied. "We wish." The oppressive silence of the Krell Nebula wrapped around the crew of Outpost Aeon like a noose tightening with every passing hour. Captain Elias Kane stood alone on the observation deck, staring into the swirling mists that churned like liquid shadows beyond the reinforced glass. His reflection was a ghost, superimposed over the endless dark. He couldn't shake the weight of the recent revelations, the existence of the Forgotten, the Varn Dominion's involvement, and now, the disturbing influence creeping into his crew's minds. His fingers traced the edges of a data pad, reading Myra's latest report on the psychological state of the crew. Tensions had skyrocketed. Fear and paranoia were rising, exacerbated by the alien whispers many claimed to hear in the quiet of their quarters. Elias himself had started hearing faint voices at night, like echoes from a dream he couldn't quite remember. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, grounding himself before returning to the briefing room. Commander Mira Voss was already there, pacing like a caged predator. Dr. Nathaniel Pierce leaned against the table, his face pale and haggard. Luke O'Rourke, their engineer, fiddled with the data slate, muttering to himself as though afraid of the silence. "We're unraveling," Elias said without preamble as he entered. Mira nodded grimly. "We're not just dealing with the Varn anymore. The Forgotten's influence is pervasive. I've seen crew members arguing over nothing, isolating themselves, reporting hallucinations." Nathaniel chimed in, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Their psychic influence might be tied to whatever artifact or presence resides deeper in the nebula. It's affecting brain waves, inducing paranoia. If we don't act fast, we might lose the crew before any enemy fires a shot." Luca's eyes flickered with concern. "The station's systems have also been glitching, life support fluctuations, random lockdowns. It's like something is inside our systems, subtly sabotaging us." Elias clenched his jaw. "And the Varn fleet is still out there. Kaler isn't going to wait for us to implode before making his next move." Mira stopped pacing. "Then we need to move. We've been scanning the nebula since we got here. There's a signal, faint, but consistent, emanating from deep within the densest region. It could be the source of the disturbance," Nathaniel added. "Or a trap." Elias nodded. "Either way, we need answers." Hours later, aboard the Shuttle Tempest, the mission team was small: Elias, Mira, Nathaniel, and Luca, chosen for their expertise and loyalty. They left behind a skeleton crew on Aeon, trusting Lieutenant Ramirez to hold the fort. The Tempest plunged into the nebula's heart, guided by faint energy readings. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The nebula's swirling tendrils of gas thickened, obscuring vision beyond a few meters. External sensors struggled to penetrate the haze, returning ghost images of structures that disappeared as soon as they were detected. Inside the cockpit, Myra's hands gripped the controls. "Visibility near zero. Switching to manual nav." Elias stared at the monitor displaying the strange readings ahead. "Anything from the source?" Lucas shook his head. "Only static and a faint signal pulse, like a heartbeat." Nathaniel shivered. "A heartbeat of something very old." Moments later, through the mists, a colossal shape emerged, a derelict structure the size of a battleship, half buried in the nebula's gas clouds. Its exterior was scarred and overgrown with strange crystalline formations pulsing faintly with an eerie violet light. Mira whispered, "What in the hell is that?" Elias responded, voice low, "I think we found the Forgotten." The Tempest latched onto the derelict's docking ring, which hissed open unnaturally, as if welcoming them. Inside, they found a chamber bathed in dim purple light, with alien glyphs etched across the walls, symbols reminiscent of both Varn and human script, but older, corrupted. Nathaniel scanned them. "These glyphs, they're similar to the ruins from the Orion Expanse, but twisted. As if rewritten by another force." They moved deeper, passing decayed bodies of what appeared to be Varn soldiers, their armor shattered, faces frozen in terror. The air reeked of age and decay, but also of something metallic, like blood. Luca pointed to a wall-mounted interface. "Looks like some kind of control node." Elias gave a nod. "See if you can access it." Luca approached cautiously, connecting his tools to the ancient device. As he worked, Nathaniel's voice trembled. "The crew back on Aeon, they're vulnerable to this influence. Whatever power resides here, it's seeping through space itself." Mira stiffened. "We're not leaving without shutting it down." Suddenly, the device pulsed, and the lights in the chamber flickered. Luca recoiled as the interface sprang to life, revealing a holographic projection, an enormous biomechanical construct resembling both a vessel and a sentient being. It loomed in the projection, surrounded by tendrils of dark energy. Nathaniel muttered, "That's no ship, it's a living entity." The hologram shifted, displaying star maps of the Krell Nebula and beyond, including sectors in human space, marked with symbols. One system blinked red, Aeon's location. Elias cursed. "It's targeting us." Before anyone could react, a deep voice echoed through the chamber, not from speakers, but directly into their minds. "Who dares trespass in the sanctuary of the Eternal?" The crew staggered as psychic pressure pressed down on them. Elias fought against the sensation of drowning. "We're here to stop you." Laughter reverberated through their minds, cold and infinite. "You are but children. I have devoured stars, enslaved empires. Your kind will kneel." Mira fired her weapon into the hologram, causing the projection to stutter and fade momentarily. The voice fell silent, replaced by alarms throughout the derelict. Luca's voice was hoarse. "We triggered something." The team sprinted back toward the Tempest, shadows moving in the corridors behind them. Mira fired over her shoulder at a creature that resembled a corrupted Varn soldier, twisted by biomechanical tendrils. "Go! Go!" she shouted. The derelict itself seemed alive now, corridors shifting, walls bleeding violet fluid as sirens wailed. Dozens of reanimated Varn husks crawled from the shadows, claws outstretched. Reaching the Tempest, Elias slammed the hatch shut as Mira fired the last rounds of her rifle. Nathaniel barely made it inside, drenched in sweat, muttering, "They're puppets, controlled." Luca launched the Tempest into the nebula, weaving through tendrils of gas as the derelict's tendrils stretched after them like tentacles, scraping the hull. Back in space, Mira shouted, "Incoming Varn ships on sensors." Elias gritted his teeth. "Kayla's fleet." The Tempest returned to Outpost Aeon under pursuit. The station's defenses activated, intercepting Varn raiders as Kayla's fleet arrived, surrounding the nebula. Inside the command center, Elias addressed the crew. "Listen up! We've confirmed that the Forgotten is not just a remnant, it's alive and manipulating both us and the Varn. We either stop it here, or it spreads beyond the nebula." Mira added, "Kayla's forces are pawns too. They don't realize they're serving a greater threat." Nathaniel stepped forward. "The derelict we found, it's only part of the entity. The Forgotten's mind extends throughout the nebula itself. It's rooted here." Elias turned to Luca. "Can we sever the connection?" Luca hesitated. "Maybe. But we need to overload the station's reactor, triggering a chain reaction through the nebula's volatile gases." Elias frowned. "A suicide run." "No," Luca corrected. A controlled overload. But it'll require someone to stay behind to detonate manually. The room fell silent. As the crew prepared for the final confrontation, Mira found Elias alone in the observation deck. "You're thinking about volunteering," she said. Elias nodded. "Someone has to. Better me than anyone else." She sighed. "You're not doing this alone." Elias smiled faintly. "Wouldn't expect anything less." Outside, the nebula churned violently, as if aware of their intent. The Forgotten's tendrils of influence thickened, ready to strike as Aeon prepared for its last stand. The orbital view of Aeon Station was eerily quiet as the crew stared at the holomap. The Krell fleet had pulled back, but that wasn't a comfort. They knew it meant something worse. Captain Elias Kane leaned forward, fingers clasped tightly as Mira Voss paced behind him. Across from them, Dr. Nathaniel Pierce and Engineer Luke O'Rourke stared in stunned silence. The Varn Dominion's ancient warships had broken through, and their path pointed directly to Outpost Aeon. Communications had been flooded with distress signals from nearby systems. Civilian ships were evacuating fringe colonies, while the military's primary fleets scrambled to form defensive lines. Yet everyone knew it might already be too late. The sheer scale of the Varn Dominion's armada was overwhelming. Each vessel, remnants of a forgotten empire, dwarfed even the largest human battleships. Admiral Kayla's face flickered on the display, his voice sharp and resolute. "You must evacuate Aeon. My forces will buy you time, but even we cannot hold forever." Captain Kane shook his head. "No. We hold here. Aeon's strategic position is too important. If we lose this station, the entire Krell Nebula will fall." Kayla's eyes softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "Then we die together." Myra's hand brushed Kane's shoulder. "We still have the artifact," she whispered. "If there's even a chance it can turn the tide." Everyone knew what she meant, the black, star-forged device they'd retrieved from the depths of the Krell Nebula. Dr. Pierce had warned against using it, its technology far beyond anything human or Varn could fully comprehend. But desperation left no room for caution. Kane stood and addressed the crew. "We have one chance. If this relic can disrupt their fleet, we buy time for reinforcements to arrive." Nathaniel rubbed his temples. "It could destroy us, too. We've only scratched the surface of its capabilities." "We don't have a choice," Kane said grimly. Preparations moved swiftly. Kayla's remaining ships formed a perimeter around Aeon, their hulls reflecting the distorted light of the nebula. Meanwhile, inside the station, Mira and Luca worked tirelessly in the artifact chamber, deciphering the ancient glyphs inscribed on the device's surface. The artifact pulsed faintly, resonating with the energy of the surrounding nebula, as if aware of the coming storm. Luca wiped sweat from his brow. "We can route the station's core power into the artifact, but it'll draw everything we've got." Mira adjusted one of the control nodes. "Then we commit. We pour it all in." On the observation deck, Kane watched as the first wave of Varn's ships broke through the outer perimeter. The battle was unlike anything he had seen. Massive Varn dreadnoughts, bristling with ancient plasma lances and hull-disrupting cannons, tore through the Varn Dominion defense lines. Even Kayla's flagship, a monstrous behemoth from the old wars, struggled against the onslaught. The human fleet was stretched thin. Ships engaged the enemy, weaving through fields of wreckage and shattered asteroids. Explosions dotted the darkness, illuminating the grim ballet of war. Yet through it all, Aeon Station remained a flickering beacon on the edge of annihilation. Back in the artifact chamber, power surged dangerously. Systems across the station began to flicker and overload. Nathaniel arrived with an emergency medkit in hand, already expecting casualties from radiation leaks and power surges. "The artifact's drawing too much!" Luca shouted. Myra's hands hovered over the console. "We're almost there. Just hold it steady." A sudden tremor rocked the station. The outer hull screamed as plasma lances tore into its superstructure. Kane's voice came through the intercom. "We've lost the upper docking ring. They're boarding." Kayla's battered visage appeared next. "We will reinforce your lower levels." Hold your ground. In the corridors of Aeon, chaos erupted. Varn boarding parties and station's security forces clashed in brutal close-quarter combat. Mira and Luca raced to finish the artifact's activation, while alarms blared and emergency lights bathed the corridors in crimson. Kane led the defense personally, his pulse rifle barking as he and a group of Marines repelled enemy forces inch by inch. "You're not taking this station," Kane growled, taking down 2 Varn warriors before falling back to a reinforced bulkhead. Meanwhile, Nathaniel stayed behind in the artifact chamber, monitoring Myra's vital signs as she synchronized the artifact's energy output. The artifact responded to her presence, its dark surface illuminating with star-like constellations. "Something's changing," Mira said breathlessly. "It's alive." Nathaniel's eyes widened as readings spiked. "Mira, it's interfacing with you. It's using you as a conduit." A Varn boarding unit breached the chamber, forcing Nathaniel to grab a nearby sidearm. "Get behind me!" Mira ignored the chaos. Her mind swam with images, visions of stars being born and destroyed, ancient civilizations collapsing, and whispers of forgotten knowledge. The artifact's intelligence spoke without words, guiding her to unlock its latent power. Luca burst in, dragging a wounded Marine. "We've got more incoming!" Suddenly, the artifact flared, releasing a pulse that vaporized the Varn soldiers mid-charge. Nathaniel stumbled back, eyes wide in terror and awe. The device wasn't just technology. It was a weapon, an entity, and perhaps a key to survival. In orbit, Kayla's flagship braced as the pulse rippled outward, disrupting enemy vessels. The Varn dreadnoughts faltered, their shields collapsing, weapons freezing mid-charge. "What have they done?" Kayla whispered. Inside Aeon, Mira collapsed to her knees, but the artifact steadied her, supporting her physically and mentally. "It's giving us control," she murmured. "We can turn the station into something else." Kane's voice came through the comms. "Mira, what's happening?" She rose slowly, eyes glowing faintly. "We can merge the artifact with Aeon. It will fight with us." Luca stepped closer, cautious. "You're saying the station will become a living weapon?" Mira nodded, voice distant. "Yes." Kane's orders were swift. "Do it." The artifact integrated with the station's systems, fusing ancient and modern technology. Aeon's structure shifted subtly, defensive platforms reactivating, dormant weaponry emerging from concealed compartments. In the void, the station's silhouette took on an otherworldly glow. The next wave of Varn dreadnoughts approached, but this time Aeon fought back. Energy lances, unlike anything human engineers had devised, erupted from the station, tearing through Varn vessels effortlessly. The tides began to turn. On the command deck, Kane watched the battle unfold with cautious hope. Myra's voice came through, steady and resolute. "It's not just a weapon. It's shielding us too. The artifact is protecting Aeon."